Marshall Lee of DonkeyJawProjects.com, and today we're going to talk about DC Comics. There's been some news, there's been some things going on, rumors. DC, the sky's falling, everything's going crazy. DC Comics is dying, and I don't know what we're going to do. So I got Mr. Russ Leach here of Comic Book BlackBelt to talk about it with me. How you doing, man?
How you doing?
Where can people find you, sir?
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube, Comic Book BlackBelt, at my website, russleach.com, or over on comicbookblackbelt.com. You can go to my book website, which is just a holding website at the moment, onlydeathcansavus.com, and all of those addresses you can sign up for my email subscription list so that I can inform you of all the crazy things that are going on. Also, if you have an opportunity, head on over to my Twitter account, Comic Book B BlackBelt, because I'm nearly 1,000, and when I hit 1,000, I'm going to send out some posters to people, just some random selections.
That's awesome. Definitely go check that stuff out. You guys know where you can find me, DonkeyJawProjects.com, and Marsh Comics on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And DC's crumbling, man. So obviously, we already talked a little bit before the thing, but you've heard the news. What's your thoughts right now on what's kind of going on with DC right now?
Well, from what I can see, and from my understanding of my simple understanding of business, is I can't see DC just going away. I just don't think it'll happen. Personal opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I think after seeing the example of what Marvel have been doing, they've been getting, is it IDW to do some of their books. I think there's more chance of them managing out certain characters or certain titles to other publishers than completely removing themselves from the comic scene. I also think that you do hear a lot of these stories. You never fully, none of us are ever fully aware of all the facts. So it's difficult to make a reasonable opinion, really. It's all guesswork. My guess would be with a brand or a character as strong as Batman and the associated characters around him, and also Superman, and things like the Justice League, I would find it difficult for them to remove themselves from comic creation. And far from it, I don't think that the comics are dying. I think the industry as it is has made some dreadful mistakes over the past 30 years. The main one being taking books out of newsstands and keeping them away from just your average punter who's walking in and out of 7-Elevens and what have you, grocery stores, and that's really damaged comics in general. But people still want to read comics. There's still a market for them, and I think DC can make it out of this. Although I'll be honest, from what I've read, it doesn't look great for them. So I'm just my glass is half full. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. It's hard for me to say too. I don't really follow what DC is doing that often, although there have been some things recently that I've seen that have actually gotten me excited about some of the titles. There's a title. There's I guess Frank Miller's doing another Dark Knight series with like a female Batman protagonist. I don't really know anything about her, but the design looks cool. And what's his name? Is it Raphael Grandpa or something? I think that artist. He's like a really amazing artist. So I don't know. Just that alone, those few things there tell me that might be kind of a cool book.
But I think they're sort of clawing at like Dark Knight Returns is. It's been around for a long time, the original book, and along with the Watchmen, they're kind of like they're shadows of their former self. I think what they need to do is create something new, and that's what all large companies find difficult doing whether it's film companies with Hollywood, or whether it's publishing companies like Marvel and DC. They've done all their creation 40 years ago, 50 years ago, and now they're kind of because they're become large businesses and they've effectively got to answer to financial questions, the creativity suffers. That's my personal view. And what they need to do is it's like when they made Star Wars, they didn't think it was going to be a trilogy. Okay, there may have been some writing about parts, and George Lucas always kind of saw it as almost like a remaking of those Saturday morning adventure things like Buck Rogers and what have you. But he saw it as it was a single film. It was a chance taken, a massive chance taken on his part, and they made a blockbuster and actually changed science fiction. And there's not. I know you can't do that every time, but there's not enough of that involved, I think, in comics from a mainstream perspective. Obviously, indie are constantly doing that, but from a mainstream publisher, you need to change it up a bit and do something else. And I'm not just talking about changing a costume, killing someone off, changing their sex, whatever it might be. That isn't going to do it. What you've got to do is create something new and dynamic and pull people in. And this is a problem that they have, and it's not all their fault. It's a problem that they have, and that's set against a monopoly of distribution that just doesn't encourage normies to go out and buy books. So that it's a multitude of issues that they have, and I think something new would be really good. I understand why they go back to the old, and I'm not talking about going back to old things like Batman. Obviously, there are certain things that are evergreen. That's a given. You want to see those characters again and again and again. But once you've made that first story, do you really want to retell it in different ways, or do you just want to go on and find a new story for that evergreen product? And I have not personally been interested in the new Watchmen stuff. Some of the artwork was lovely, but it didn't. The Watchmen was a story of its time. It worked, and apart from the fact that deconstruction became the name of the game, and it actually to a degree ruined superhero books. I don't want to see it all again or why it happened the first time. I want to move on and find something new. That's a personal opinion, but that's where I see it. So I don't really want to see another Dark Knight. I want to see them make a story that's as good as Dark Knight from a different perspective. I mean, the Sean Murphy.
Yep.
That stuff, completely fresh and new, and obviously his style is wonderful. That is what I'm talking about. Something completely new. Make something new, and they did. They had a great response to that. It did really well, and unfortunately they've got problems, and sometimes they're flogging a dead horse, and it's not working. It's not all their fault. I'm not laying the blame completely at them. There's lots of reasons for it, and not all of them are theirs. But I think they need to come up with something new rather than rehashing the old.
Yeah. I mean, even with that one, from what I understand, they're doing another Sean Gordon Murphy White, Batman series. So
I can't leave it alone.
Yeah.
Make it every time there's something new. Let's make it a trilogy. No, let's make it a quadrilogy. No.
Yeah, it's sad to see kind of companies like that we all have loved for a long time, when there's so much opportunity, to just see them. It just seems like they don't. I don't know. They're just not open to something new. It feels like there's so many new ideas going on right now in the indie comic scene, and just in all these other avenues and stuff. And it's just kind of weird to see them not really try to be aggressive at evolving, unfortunately. And also, if anybody in the chat if you have anything you want to contribute. Feel free, any questions or whatever. We're just kind of chatting, and we could talk about different things too. But we wanted to kind of start this off with talking about something that's very relevant to kind of what's going on. If you're a comic book creator, you can't kind of ignore this kind of thing.
I think it's funny what Fogbreaker just said. Rob Liefeld is the guy with the Enders Near sandwich board that everybody laughs at until the rain of blood starts. That's brilliant.
Yeah. Give it to Rob Liefeld to not keep his mouth closed about things for sure.
I think what the problem is that healthy conversation, healthy debate is being stifled at one end or the other. I think I mentioned to you earlier about a channel I was listening to, Perch. If you get to go and see his channel, and I think he's got really level-headed views about things that are going on. Obviously there's a bit of a culture war going on, but out in the real world, people are still buying comics. There is still a market out there, but I think there's some massive missteps being made by larger companies. And the missteps are not being repeated by the indie comics. I think the problem with indie comics is there is and this is an arguable point, there is a level of standard, as it were, that is higher in mainstream. But then you look at some mainstream comics and they're diabolical. So again, it's difficult to argue that sometimes. But other than that, there are massive missteps being made by mainstream comics, and as we were saying, one of them is originality, or the lack of. So
yeah, for sure. Our buddy Infinite Coolness with Creed Stonegate. Creed, he was on, I think, the last episode. Oh, we got another visitor as well. He's asking, what news are you talking about? So let's see if we can get somebody else in here. I see Mr. Fue.
Hey,
what's
how's
up?
everyone doing?
Fue.
All right,
Hello,
how are
Russ,
you
how
doing?
you doing, buddy?
How you doing? All right.
It's awesome. The good old friend.
I've been trying to join in with one of your live streams, Marshall, for who knows how long. Finally, it's worked.
Someone from the same side of the Atlantic as me. That's great.
Absolutely. It's always great to meet a fellow British person, good sir.
Yeah, man, for sure. Yeah, I think you and I did a video. Russ is breaking things. I think you and I did a video when we first kind of met. And I don't know, that was like the first and the last time videos worked between us with live stream. That was weird.
Luckily, StreamYard likes me, unlike Google Hangouts.
Yeah, no doubt. So Infinite Coolness, Mr. Creed, our buddy Creed, he is asking, what news are we talking about? Fue, I bet you have a pretty good handle on the situation. Can you explain the news we're talking about DC Comics?
About DC Comics? Yeah, I've read a little bit about it. Obviously, they've had some problems going on throughout the year where they've had declining sales, especially with some of their imprints like Vertigo, and then shutting down Vertigo and saying things like, Mad Magazine, we've decided just to do reprints. Why bother doing new stuff? Which is, that's a big sign that there's a problem, a real big problem. Rob Liefeld has obviously been on Twitter. He's been very vocal saying it's not looking good for DC. And even though there were lots of naysayers saying, you don't know what you're on about, Rob, you haven't got a clue. He's been sticking to his guns. And now there's rumors out there about, I think it's AT&T that now own Warner Media, who of course own DC Comics. And as any business does, they're looking to save as much money as possible whilst making as much money as possible. And the rumor is they're looking at DC going, does DC Comics really need to exist anymore? That's pretty much what I know about the situation.
That's about it. Yeah. I would think, as I mentioned about Perch and about some other aspects of business, at the same time as you would listen to someone like Perch, who has his own comic book store, if I get that right, or being aware of business perspectives. It's not just about ins and outs as far as bottom line is concerned, but there's all kinds of other issues about saving IP and all the rest of it. You'd also have to listen to someone like Rob Liefeld, because he's in the business. So it's quite confusing to the rest of us who are not as deep in the business as someone like himself is. But and you hear conflicting stories coming out, and it's tricky. But you'd have to say there's definitely some issues for DC and AT&T to sort out, which is pretty much like we were saying before you came in. And it's not helping comics in general. It just doesn't aid. It doesn't help the process. And I'm not surprised they had to shut down Vertigo and that they had to close down some of their titles and shorten their brand, their title line, because they're not selling enough. I mean, yeah, they're still selling. And from a comic book shop perspective, they're still saying, look, these books are still selling. They're still making money. That's fine. But it's a trajectory that's going down. It's ever going down, and that's not being a naysayer. I believe there's still a great market out there, and I'll keep rattling the same saber every time. When you took them away from the newsstand, that was when Diamond became a monopoly. That was where the key thing happened, and the reason that they're having trouble now. You get away from all the ideology and all the arguments about what should or shouldn't be in a book or whatever. If there were a bigger market, if there were more people buying comics, it wouldn't matter, because there'd always be someone who would find something they like in the comic.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's it. The market's not big enough. They're not making enough money, and they need to do something to figure it out. And when I say they, I mean the bigger publishers, because at the moment it's looking like the future belongs to indie. I'm not one of those guys that says, "Oh my God, the sky's falling in and the comics book industry is about to collapse." That would be silly to say that, but indie really is coming up, and it's something that's happened over the past 2 years for all kinds of different reasons. And the reasons that often get left out are these reasons of market share, of having a real valid market to sell to. And of course, the fewer and fewer comic shops you have, the fewer and fewer people you sell to. Whereas if you put comic books back on the newsstand, you've got everybody to sell to. Yeah, it's a numbers game. It's maths.
It's not rocket science at the end of the day.
No.
And I think one thing that people have to start acknowledging, because I know that certain people who work at DC have acknowledged this, is that the majority of their sales are coming from older issues and reprints. Most of the stuff that they're putting out now just isn't selling that well, and there's a reason for that. The audience is speaking to them through a language that they should understand, and that's money. And yet for some reason they don't seem to understand the language of we are the readers, and what you're putting out at the moment, it's not doing it for us for whatever reason. And it's not just like that with comics. It's also like that with the music industry, with the film industry. The film industry less than I think anywhere else. But we're seeing it all the time. People going, you know what, I'm going to save my money and buy back issues and trade paperbacks and all old stuff. And I mean, I was in a forum not too long ago, and I was speaking to a guy who used to own a comic book store, and he's got kids now, and his kids just weren't getting into comics, and he couldn't understand why. And then he looked at what they were reading, and it was all the newer stuff. And he said, well, here's X-Men Days of Future Past. Just give it a try and see what you think. And his kids were reluctant. Then they went off, read it, came back, and they were like, Dad, why can't comics be this good today? Yeah,
I'm afraid I have to agree with you. Completely taking out any aspect of ideology as far as any politics that might be in comics, any views on sex, color, and all the rest of it, completely removing any of those arguments.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you have people sitting around in a comic talking to each other in a cafe or at breakfast, it's boring. Comics are not there for you to do that kind of story. You want to see big, vast stories of epic nature, or super villains and what have you, kicking the crap out of each other. Those are exciting stories. If you want a slice of life, there are books to go and find that. Comics are for everyone and about everything. There are always books for that. But the American comic industry is based pretty much on sci-fi and superheroes and that kind of stuff. And it needs to be action and fun. And that's why I love the Bronze Age, because back in the Bronze Age, comics were fun. They were action, not violence. They were romance, not sex. And they never spoke down to their readers. Didn't matter what age the readers were. They never spoke down to them. And even if there was some, I remember some Avengers comics where they, talked about race, and obviously X-Men were obviously an analogy of race and bigotry, and because it wasn't piled on thick, it worked. It got a message across, and they never spoke down to anyone. And those are the kind of comics that jump out at people and make people want to read them. And there's not enough of that kind of stuff out there. It's pretty simple.
Absolutely. And as the great one, the late Stan Lee once said, he said, it's okay to have a message in comics, but you put the story first. Before anything else. And I completely agree with you 100%. It used to be action, not violence. It used to be romance, not sex. But even in the 90s, when you had Vertigo putting stuff out like Preacher, which is a very mature reader's comic that would have things like violence and sex, it was still action packed. It was still fantastical in its own way. And because it was for a mature reader's audience, they had a bit more character development. It became more of a character driven story. But when it comes to the kids market, I mean, I know this is something that you've said on one of your videos, Russ, and I completely agree with it. As someone who writes mature audience comics, I completely agree with you when you say, and I hope I'm not paraphrasing here, that comics has abandoned kids.
Yeah, it has.
And that sucks.
Yeah,
that sucks big time. Because all the kids are going, well, if comics can't offer me anything, video games can. And
exactly.
It's fine if kids are playing video games, but let's get them reading as well, because reading's actually fun.
Comics are a great gateway into reading literature. They gave me a vocabulary when I was a kid, and you're absolutely right. There's no reason why you can't have comics for adults, comics for kids. The problem is in the 90s, what happened was that they forgot the kids market, and what happened, and I was part of it. I wanted a dark Batman. I lapped up, Killing Joke. I loved it as a young man. I absolutely loved it, and there's nothing wrong with those. And you have to have them, in my view, because you have to have a broad church of all these concepts and ideas. But don't forget that market that made comics big, that make them great, and that was the kids market. And again, don't talk, just because you're writing for kids, don't talk down to them.
I completely agree. Agree. One thing I've definitely learned from being a writer for so many years is you can write a comic for kids, but the best thing to do is write it as if you're writing for teenagers, young teenagers, because kids, contrary to popular belief, they're not stupid. They
exactly.
really are not stupid. So if you write something that's for young teenagers, the younger kids will pick it up. And some of it, they'll be like, I don't get that, but I can ask my mum and dad about that. And then they learn something. Then they go, okay, that's cool. That's clever. And then later on, when they're ready, they start reading some of the more mature titles.
Yeah.
these are easy fixes. I mean,
Yeah,
I was talking to Marshall not so long ago saying, look, you know, like I said, I write for a mature audience. I write dark stuff that tackles dark subject matters, but I also have a diploma in writing children's books. So I do have the odd character that is designed for the teenage audience and children's audience. You know, we have to be as versatile as we can with our creations, because like you said, there's a massive church of people out there. The church is full and they're all going, please give me comics, give me good comics. And the person at the altar's going, we just want your money.
Yeah,
that's it, really.
But if if they really wanted the money, then they wouldn't preach. They just make sure they, you know, it's
absolutely. I couldn't
into algorithms, analogies. Sorry, no. Stay away from that.
No doubt. So, Fogbreaker Studios says every company is dying until they have a Walking Dead moment. Success is seeing an opening where others see a hole. Which I think is totally true. I mean, I've said it a million times, you know, here is, you know, we're watching Marvel and DC do some pretty odd things. They've been doing some pretty weird things for a while now. And whether, you know, again, the politics, I don't think any of us care that much about the politics, whatever they're trying to put in there, like whatever, they're putting certain things in there. But like, you know, I think, we just want good stories. That's what we're looking at. That's what we keep saying. We want good stories. We want good stories. And, you know, like I said, we're seeing weird stuff from the content. We're seeing weird stuff from, you know, the business moves and stuff, just stuff that doesn't make sense. You know, there's nothing wrong with taking a risk, trying something new, but they're just doing stuff that doesn't make sense. And then I'm looking at independent companies and independent creators, and they're doing a lot of things that does make sense and does react to what the market is doing. And it's like, how did they not see that? You know, how do they not have a team of people looking into this kind of stuff and trying to figure that out? It doesn't seem like they're about the business anymore, you know?
They're making some very odd decisions. You have to say that some of it's ideological, some of it's just some of it's driven by bean counters, and I don't want to, any of you out there that might be accountants, you're great people, but sometimes it just comes down to money, and they're not making creative decisions, or they're not making decisions that enable creators, let's put it that way. And it's not helping. It really isn't. And what you should be doing is saying, like I was saying, that we would talk about politics or ideology. If you put it in a book where everybody's kicking the crap out of each other, then, and it's got fantastic art, you're going to read it, you're going to take it. But if you get 3 pages of exposition talking to you about how you should or shouldn't think, whatever way you take it, it's like, oh, that's boring. Do you know what? You're going to get an idea to me if you make it snappy and make it worth reading. And then maybe I'll just agree with you, because I've taken it in and it makes sense to me. But if all you do is just talk ad hominem just for pages and pages, or panels and panels of talking heads, and indie books aren't doing that. No,
they're not. And to the point of the creative choices that they're making of not taking risks, my theory behind that is, they've got so successful, they've forgotten what it's like to be hungry. What it's like to not have any money in the bank and going, oh, my stomach's making weird noises. I need to do something quick. I know this is crazy, but let's do this. Put it out there and see what happens.
No, you're right. And that's what indie books are doing at the moment. It's become, it's a little bit of the Wild West. We've got several things coming together. We've got a combination of an unsettled reading population, as it were, the marketplace. They're not being given enough books, and I don't mean enough titles. I mean just variety. They're not getting enough variety. You've got a bunch of people who are keen to create new variety, and you've got that space being made by the decisions, I think, that the bigger companies are making, along with technology. And people are getting themselves out there like never before. And now you've got things like, Kickstarter and Indiegogo. There are places where you can, it's effectively for comics, it's not so much crowdfunding as it is pre-ordering. And you get to see how it works. You get to see how it's done. If a campaign is done properly, you get to ride along with that campaign and feel even more part of it. And let's face it, one of the main things that Stan Lee did while he was in control, and then Jim Shooter after him, is the editorial always spoke to the fans that were reading and made them feel like they were part of the family, made them feel like they were part of Marvel. And that's why it worked. They spoke to the fans directly. And that's effectively what indie books are doing with crowdfunding. They're speaking to people directly. And things like YouTube and what we're doing now, all that stuff brings everybody together and just helps the fandom.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we need to find ways to get people excited about comics. And I don't see the big two doing that at all. Let's see. Looks like Creed says DC has always had the same problem. They're run by people who don't believe in their awesome characters. Wow, that's something right there. They use Batman as a crutch. Another good point. And they have hundreds of awesome characters they don't use. Wow. I mean,
I think he's right to a degree. I think you got to, he's certainly, they do use Batman as a crutch. If you look at the amount of Batman books that have been put out, and this comes right the way back to what we were talking about taking chances and creativity and doing something a bit different, and not just like Murphy's doing with Batman, the Batman Who Laughs, and is it White Knight? He's doing a fantastic job, but not just doing an Elseworlds of Batman. Do something new, or go and get all those other characters and do something new with them. There's still a great library of content and characters that all of the larger publishers have. Do something with them, make something new, make something happen, make it happen. Is exactly what Foy was saying, is that they are not hungry enough to make it happen.
Yeah. I love that point. It's so true. I mean, when you're hungry, you really moves and I don't know. I'm thinking of a lot of things now with all that. There's what is it? There's a Malcolm Gladwell book. I think it's just called something about Goliath or something. I don't know. But he talks about this whole thing of like David and Goliath and basically Goliath kind of represents kind of the established, way of doing things, the people who basically are in charge. And then, David kind of represents these people who, they're not the established, but they're also not only that, like they're also kind of stuck in their own ways. But David one of the reasons why David was successful against Goliath is because he used a different tactic than Goliath expected, because there's a certain way that you fight, that people fought back in those days. And when it was a situation like that, you would use, Goliath, this is like a hand-to-hand combat thing. Like Goliath's like, who's going to come and fight me and win, this type of thing. And David used a more long-form tactic where something that you would like shoot an arrow or something type of thing. He used a slingshot. That's not what they were expecting. And he took Goliath down, he used a different tactic. He wasn't, what everybody was doing wasn't working. So he did something different,
Happens in business all the time. You have monoliths they're not agile enough. And that's what indie is at the moment. It's very agile. It can move any way the market wants it to move. Especially with crowdfunding the way it is, or if you can fund yourself prior to the crowdfunding campaign, you can put something out, and then if the market says, no, we want it to go it this way, you can take it another way. There's even going to be a process, I think, at some point in time where crowdfunding books can go from one issue to another and will actually canvas their fan fan base to see how they would like it to move, which is something that the Hollywood monoliths and the publishing monoliths aren't able to do. And so you'll be able to bring more fans along or more readership along because they'll be seeing something they're having a hand in creating. I think that's where it's going to move to, or at least part of it is going to move to there. And I've met people in business that have been involved in seed funding, gone into a business or created a business, got it up to a certain point, and then walked away and done it all again because they see that the actual what you're going to get back. You get so much more back from growing a business, making it work, and then working in an agile way. As soon as it gets too big, then it can't do anything new. It can't do anything. It has to. Everything moves so quickly. All the working parts move so slowly. Sorry, but it's difficult for them to apply themselves to what people want, and so they're always a little bit behind. Whereas, and I think you're exactly right. I think the Goliath in this are those big publishers, and the David is indie comics, and that's it. I don't know whether they'll take them down with a slingshot, but they're going to have a damn good try. And I don't think indie comics are the same as they were back in the day. Because of all the technological advances of communication, the internet and what have you, I think it's a different animal now. It's going to be a different outcome.
Oh, absolutely. Plus, from the writing perspective, one thing that DC did so many decades ago now is they did the Death of Superman, where they told us they killed Superman, but they didn't. They killed Death. Which means every time I pick up a Batman or a Constantine or a Power Girl issue, they can tell me, oh, things aren't looking good for this character as much as they want. I know that character's going to live. Even if they die, they're going to be back real soon. I don't know that with indie comics. No. Which means when I get into one of their stories, I really feel fearful for those characters when stuff ain't looking good for them.
Yes, definitely. So it's that not knowing. In like I was saying earlier on, it's not all their own fault. The larger publishers have had running titles because people were hungry for those titles, and it was almost like Saturday morning cartoons or Adventure, Buck Rogers, whatever. You kept on coming in for the next part, and the amount of times that Reed Richards turned around and said, "The Fantastic Four is dead," and you knew that they weren't. You knew that they weren't, and it didn't matter because you enjoyed it, and it was all part of the fun. But that, I think that world has gone, and so what you have to do is you have to find new ways of encouraging people in, and you have to give them real cliffhangers, not just like soapy ones. And you're absolutely right. Indie comics are more able to do that. It's not necessarily the fault of the bigger publishers. That's just the way they are. But indie comics are definitely in a better position to make people go, oh my God, what's going to happen next? And really, that's what people want. They want to be entertained.
Yeah, and to counter my own argument about them killing Death, Marvel's put out The Immortal Hulk, which is probably one of their better selling titles at the moment. Yeah. And one of the great things that Al Ewing did is he said, okay, well, Bruce Banner can't die. Let's get creative with that. And it has made an incredible book that people love and they want more. Yeah. Yet we're not seeing more of that across any of the other titles whatsoever.
But it's like you've got some really brilliant writers there, and Al Ewing is one of them. And again, you don't have to agree with Al Ewing, whatever he says on Twitter, whatever he does. I really don't give a monkeys. And even if he's a bit rude to fans, I mean, I don't think you should be. I would never be rude to anyone who was approaching me about my work, even if they didn't like it. That's not the point. So from that. Bad, from what I've seen, don't do that. Okay, don't do that, Al. Not that he'd ever listen to me. However, even outside of that, I don't give a monkeys. If the book's great, I'm going to buy it.
Yeah,
I don't care, and that's what it comes down to. Just put out good content, and people will come.
Yeah,
completely agree.
For sure. I mentioned a few people, actually. I mentioned this to Russ. I actually mentioned it to you too, Fue, in a message. There's that one Batman. And again, it's interesting because Russ brought the point to me that again, they can't seem to do anything but rehash things. But there's that Batman Returns coming out, and it's got Raphael Grandpa, which I really think he's an amazing artist. So I don't know, just that kind of looks interesting to me. Once again, they're doing kind of the gender change type of thing, but I don't care. Like, I just, if it ends up being a good story, then I'm cool with it. And it's Frank Miller too, so it might, possibly be good. Another one too that Macho Man Dan Macho Man, whatever his kind of tag is, he did he's drawing the Hero book, independent book that I've had him on before. He's pretty cool. But he brought up Daniel Warren Johnson is going to be drawing a comic, a Wonder Woman comic called Dead Earth, which is coming out. It looks pretty cool. So those are actually two titles I'm actually kind of interested in. But again, you never know. Like, they could very well disappoint too. So,
well, with the Frank Miller one, that is one book I would be willing to pick up, simply based on my belief that you should never underestimate how crazy Frank Miller can and will get in any of his stories. He is the wild card in my eyes. So that's what would make me want to pick up that book to go, okay, how far off the deep end did Frank go this time? But apart from that, I'm kind of like...
To underpin what I said about that, it's okay to do all these things as long as you've got a whole bunch of other original content with it.
Yeah.
If all you're relying on is another version of Batman or another version of Wonder Woman or some kind of Elseworlds versions of them, that's not going to keep you afloat.
No.
You've got to have a whole raft of good, and that's why Vertigo worked in originally, because it was something else, and they had it on the backdrop of some really strong titles that were working really well in the marketplace. So if you take those strong titles away, or if they're watered down in some way, and then all you do is just keep on creating new Elseworlds versions of characters that everybody knows, it doesn't matter how good those stories are, they're not going to be underpinned by the rest of it, and that's the problem. I'll probably buy those books, to be honest with you. I can level this this accusation at them. I can be I can criticize them for it. Doesn't mean I'm not going to go out and buy a good book, and that's what we should all be aware of as fans, as readers, as creators. Just ignore everything else. If it's a good book, go out and buy it. It's there to be enjoyed. It's just the concern is that there's nothing afterwards except the same rehash. And
yeah,
actually, doesn't matter how good those books are, it will get boring.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to me. For me, it's before, even for a long time, way before this. I've been thinking, like, I don't really care that much about Marvel and DC usually anyways, because like, you kind of like what you said, like, it's like these characters that have been going on forever, and I enjoy the characters. I like who they were from the beginning, but at the same time, it's like in no other medium do you see characters just go on and on and on and never have an end. There's no other medium that does that. Like a movie, I can watch Matrix over again. I don't need to have 15 more Matrixes, like I can watch like all these, I could read a book that, Lord of the Rings, again, I don't need a million remakes of Lord of the Rings or whatever, so it's just.
That's exactly what the chat is saying. They're talking about, sorry, Wade.
That's all right.
They're talking about writing into a corner.
Yeah.
And that's what they're doing. They write themselves into a corner, and then they do a big reboot, except that the way that they do reboots is to just cut everything off, so that all the time you had invested in it prior to the reboot, you might as well just throw it in the bin now. And that's not the way to do a reboot. I think was it Rebirth? I wasn't involved in it, but everybody was saying Rebirth was so much better than, say, the New 52, because it wasn't as severe. So I think there's just ways of doing it, and you're right, having to write the same character all the time. Maybe sometimes you just need to kill people off or kill characters off, and then bring another one in its place. You can do that without upsetting people. You're always going to upset someone. That's just the nature of the game. But you can do that and then bring something new and keep people coming back for more.
Well, this is the thing. Like, if we compare comics to TV, then comic books are basically a soap opera with superheroes, right? Now, soap operas, they can run for decades, but the original characters that were there at the beginning, they're not there 10 years later, yet that soap opera keeps going and going and keeps getting new audiences. Whereas comics, they just go Act 1, Act 2, Act 2, Act 2, Act 2, Act 2, Act 2, Act 2. When are we going to get an Act 3? That's what we want to know.
No, you should be able to do that. I think that the problem they had is, for instance, with things like Batman, and they did try to do different stuff, but for instance, or even Spider-Man, any of the main characters in the big two, they're forever the same age, or they've only aged 10 years over a period of 50 years. And I can understand, like I was saying, it's not all their fault. I can understand why they're doing it, because they're trying to keep continuity and keep people coming back for more. But there does come a point where you have to come up with something new, and there's no, exactly the analogy you've given of being in a soap opera and having all the characters change over a 10-year or 20-year period. There's no reason why you can't do that in books. The problem is, it comes when if you call a book Spider-Man, you've always got to have Spider-Man in there, and how do you make Spider-Man someone else? So in those cases, don't age him 10 years or 20 years. Don't try and marry him off. Keep it pure. Keep it that pure adventure Spider-Man between the ages of 18 and 25, and never change it. And then write another book with a different character and try and explore what would happen if a superhero got married, or if a superhero had a business, a global conglomerate business. Just do different things, and don't write yourself into those corners, and don't feel like you have to keep running that same title. And I fear that that's probably where the whole thing about financial decisions come in, as against purely creative, which is why indie is the place where you can go find different stuff.
Once again, I agree.
Yeah, I like that. It's funny because you're just like, when it comes to that decision, don't. Like, it's just kind of that simple. But, I think there is room for, some rehashing. But, I mean, how many versions, do we need to do,
There's a great comment.
Fun, but geez.
There's a great comment here. Nick Fury is much more current than he used to be. Old Nick Fury was just Reed Richards that's not flexible. I think that's more of a damning call on the artwork than the person, but because he was quite different to Reed Richards. He smoked a cigar. Come on.
Everybody smoked a cigar back then.
I just say, bless you, Frog Breaker Studios, and your Poppin' Socks for that comment. That was awesome.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's see. One thing too is, we got Fue on here. We didn't get a chance to go through where we can find him. Let everybody know that while we're before we get into more chat here.
well, when you walk down the road and you see that really weird guy who's just shouting at parked cars, that's me. That's where you'll find me. No,
yes,
just kidding. Obviously, you can go to my website, which is www.fuestorm.co.uk. And I'm on YouTube. Just type Fuestorm into your search bar. You're going to find one of my videos somehow, some way by doing that.
We have to kind of talk to this issue into a lot of things. What we are talking about though is I still love that one comment. I think it was Fogbreaker earlier who was saying, that there's an opportunity now because these people aren't doing certain things, and now we can kind of be that David and do something different and fill in a gap. And I think all of us are trying to do just that. Fue, what have you been working on lately?
What have I been working on?
Yeah.
I've been working on a book called Lady Satan, An Angel in a Killer's Dress. I am going to point out straight away, it's not for kids. Not for kids whatsoever. I have a feeling that once the book is out, I'm going to be in a situation that I was once in before at a convention where someone came up and said, my 5-year-old wants to read your book. And I'm like, no, don't do it, please. There's language in there that they shouldn't learn until they're at least 8 years old, and it's I guess it's a horror noir thriller vigilante story. It's kind of amalgamation of just certain things that I love. Like I really do like the street level heroes and stuff. So Lady Satan I would say is definitely a street level hero. There's a lot of the supernatural horror element in it, especially she's a character that doesn't just use guns. She also uses chaos magic to help her out. It doesn't always work in her favor. And it is very noir-esque. There's a lot of mysteries that need to be solved. But at the core of it, it's a story about someone who is suffering with horrific PTSD as well as other disorders because... well, this will let you know just how mature it is. The lead character, Lady Satan, is someone who survived being the lead in a snuff film, and now she's hunting after the person that tried to kill her, who turns out to be a high-ranking British police officer who's under investigation from internal affairs at MI5. So she's got a very hard task ahead of her, but I have faith in her. I think she's going to put it off. So.
Sounds good.
Oh, bless you. Stop it, Russ. If you keep talking to me like that, I'll blush, and red does not suit me.
Well, luckily, I've had the pleasure of having a lot of discussions with Fue about this behind the scenes, and I'm definitely, it's funny for me because I'm very obvious. I'm very obviously, a Christian. I talk about my faith and stuff, but the story is good. Like it's a good story, and I really enjoy what he showed me so far. And I almost felt this is something that I said to, don't agree with me, but I thought it was almost like your version of Batman in some ways, but like way more twisted, a female protagonist, a little bit different, but there is like kind of that detective vibe going on and stuff, and action, obviously, for sure. And there's a twistedness to it, which, Batman's already twisted, but, if I know Fue, he's going to twist that knife a little bit deeper.
Yep, absolutely. Any given chance. I've been very open about this before. Like I said, there are characters of mine that I've written for more a teenage audience. In the past, I have written children's books, which is going to make a lot of parents go, yeah, but you're doing this Lady Satan thing? Oh, I'm never getting a kid's book from you ever again. But my general, one of my MOs is I'll write the story. I like to write character-driven stories. I really like to get into the psychology of the character and explore them as fully as I possibly can within the space limit, the story budget of a comic book. But one thing I'm very good at doing is going, this scene here, it's good. How can I make it even more disturbing than it already is? Let me think.
I think anyone who puts on a rubber suit and goes around beating the crap out of people has got to be on the way to GIMP, haven't they?
Oh,
and
absolutely.
So Batman has got a lot of dodgy tendencies, and
yes.
adding revenge in anywhere is always fun in a book. So yeah, I'll be waiting. Absolutely. I'll be waiting for that to be released, my friend.
Oh, thank you very much. I will be keeping everyone updated, especially as I'll be looking for beta readers of the script at some point soon. So that could be you. It could be any one of you. You have been warned, okay? Because once you read it, you can't unread it.
No,
okay?
Scratch my eyes out.
It's the fact that there's been countless times where I've been writing stuff for this character and then I've had to stop and just sit in the corner of a room and shake for a little bit because I'm like, I came up with that. My mum's not going to be proud of me anymore.
I did my first graphic novel.
Russ,
was,
is there any? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, what were you saying?
I think there's a.
I said my first graphic novel was about. There's a bit of a delay. First graphic novel was about the Ripper and its association with hell. And I know that's not an original concept, but it was quite fun to do. And where is it? It's up here. I had just stuff falling off. I had the forward done by where are we? Forward done was done by Sean Phillips of Marvel Zombies fame. And
nice.
One of the great things he said was, this comic has it all: murder, monsters, mayhem, and memories. What more could you want?
Sold.
There you go. So it's always good fun to do a little bit of adult work. At the moment, I'm working on, to answer you. Thank you, Marshall. At the moment, I'm working on my own book, Only Death Can Save Us, and it's very much an all ages sort of homage to the Bronze Age. I'm being a little held back on it because I'm actually been. I can't say too much. I've been invited to work on something that could be. This is very hyperbolic. That could be a game changer as far as digital content is concerned, and storytelling. So I can't say any more than that. But that could slow me down. But I'm still aiming to get the book out next year. So yeah, that's really where I am. Apart from other bits and pieces, I'm doing some stuff for Heartbeat, Merseyside Heartbeat, and some stuff for Lions Club and Tim Quinn of Marvel fame, and I'm doing some storyboards next month as well. So it's all just non-stop at the moment. But my heart is definitely in my book, which I've managed to get the first 8 pages drawn of. But it's going to be a little while, I think, before it sees colour.
Yeah.
Don't worry, I've already got my best crayons out to make the best bit money I have so that I can give it to you for a copy of your book.
Excellent.
Absolutely, for sure. I'm definitely looking forward to that book for sure. Is there any snuff films in your book?
No snuff films in my
well, then
book.
I take back my comment. I'm not buying the book anymore.
Nobody's going to damn well want that. There's no snuff in it. That's what a terrible error on my part. So no, all the words involved are probably. I think I'm going to put some stars in, so the odd mild word in there will be masked, so it is truly all ages, and then people can just imagine the worst word they want to.
And I will say, we've had, Russell both Russ and Fue have been active members in the Discord that I created, and it's we've seen some behind the scenes scripts from Fue, and we've also seen some behind the scenes pencil work from Mr. Russell as well, and all that stuff is looking and sounding really good. So I'm definitely excited about it for sure.
Thank you.
And I mean, that's the thing with the filling that gap. That the way that the big two aren't serving people. There's no reason why we can't do that. And everybody knows I've talked about my stuff many times, and I'm doing multiple projects. I've got a couple in the fire with Mr. Fue as well. I got one with Russ actually going on too. So it's kind of crazy. But I the Lone Wolf anthology, which there is a Kickstarter for right now. So you should definitely check that out. There should be a link in the description. If not, I'll make sure to put one there. And I'm doing the colors for that. That's a 13-page story amongst many other stories within the anthology, which I think that's going to be really cool. And I'm also kind of working a lot on Big Wrath, which is a project with myself and Peter Palmiotti, and that's going to be, I can't wait to get to that story because that's going to be really interesting. There's I don't know, it's hard to say like the essence of it, but basically the initial idea was like kind of making our own version of like the A-Team, but I kind of set it in the future, so now it's like the sci-fi thing, and it's turned into something totally kind of bonkers. But it's kind of like a superhero thing, but a little bit of a different take on it. But the main two characters in the first issue is a character called Thumper and Amali, and it's going to be pretty interesting. It's like a big hulking type of figure who is trying to make sure he's able to keep Amali safe, which is kind of like a character sort of similar to Eleven in Stranger Things. She's got some powers, but she's just a little one. So, you know, cool. It's going to be interesting.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
I've actually already backed your Kickstarter. So.
Oh, sweet. Thank you.
I'll be expecting a book.
Yeah. I mean,
quicker than Cyberfrog.
Yeah, it probably will. It'll probably come out before Cyberfrog, even though this thing isn't done yet.
It's supposed to be on its way. I you know, like hands up. I backed Cyberfrog, the first one, not all the other subsequent campaigns, because I really like his art. So Ethan Vesco's art. I also got the first. What was the one that caused all the ruckus?
Jawbreakers.
Yeah, I got that, and I actually did a review on my channel, and that's a 7 or 8 out of 10. It's a good book. I quite like the artwork. I'll be honest, most of the stuff I buy is for artwork because I'm, you know, very much that way inclined.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm kind of like a stupid dog. It's like, oh, squirrel. What a lovely piece of artwork. I got to buy that. Oh no, that's nice. I got to buy that. So you know, I'm a long time not give a damn about what other people think and what they say. That doesn't mean I want to be horrible to people or step on other people. I'm just not going to be forced into doing something I don't want to do because some person on Twitter says that I shouldn't do it. So I'll buy whatever books I want if I think they look worthwhile buying. I didn't buy it so that I could review a book that everybody was holding their nose over. I bought it because I like Malin's artwork. Yeah. And it's the same with I bought what's his name, the other guy, I'm so crap with names. I'm getting old. Doug, that's it, Doug's Naple. I bought his book, and I did actually go. I want the Earthworm Jim. I got that one. I loved Earthworm Jim back in the day, and that mainly because the artwork was so different from what I can do, which is pretty much why I like Murphy's work, because it's just so out there and so different. So it's not about who those people are; it's about the content they're creating, and I wish that everybody would just get on board that side, you know, and just. Yeah. Go and buy things that they like and stop. You know, if you don't like something and you don't like the message it's saying, don't buy it.
Absolutely.
Just get on and if you want to make your own, and then get other people to buy that. The market will decide. Simple as that.
Absolutely. And I'm a big believer of you got to separate the art from the artist.
Yes.
And that's why I backed Cyberfrog, and I'm still waiting. And I also backed Jawbreakers, and even though I've got it, I still haven't read it yet. But hopefully that'll change very soon.
I would read it. It is good. It's not great. Great. That's unfair. It's not brilliant. It's not the next big thing, but it was a good, solid book, and it shouldn't be slagged off just because of who wrote it, depending on your opinion of him. And again, I'm not getting into that. I'm just saying you keep the artist and the artist separate, the art and the artist separate, and go and buy a book that looks good. And from my point of view, it's even easier online for me because a lot of the time I'm looking at artwork and not at story. And I believe that the comics being a visual medium is 50-50. It's story and art, but it's a visual medium, and the art, that's what's going to hook you in. If the art's crap, you're not going to pick the book up. You know, as much I'm going to get slammed for being sexist here. Okay, I love my wife with all of my heart. She is a clever woman. Okay, but I saw her first before I spoke to her. You know, and same vice versa. I don't look that great now. I did back in the day when she married me, and it is that kind of thing. It's like, because humans interactions, it's a visual thing, and so is art and comics and that kind of, and films. You want to be entertained, you want to be visually inspired, you want to love what you're looking at. And then what happens with comics, what the great thing with comics is if it's a really good story, you stay for the story. So you've been enticed in, you got that candy with that beautiful artwork, and then you get the real meat and bones of it, and you get a fabulous story, and you stay for it. And hopefully they don't change the artist on the series.
Fingers crossed, but we know it happens at some point.
So so that's in my horrible old almost boomer way of trying to explain these things. I'm trying to say that that visual perceptions do mean a lot to people. They do mean a lot in all kinds of ways, but more so than any other aspect of life in things like comic books. They're a visual medium. So, and that's where I get my cue to go buy a book. So, that's my sin.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And like, if we're talking about like kids, getting them back into comics, well, I mean, like, I remember when I was a kid and I first discovered horror movies. Now, did I go, this horror movie's awesome because it had a good story? I was a kid. I was stupid. I was like, oh my God, someone's head just exploded. Let me rewind the videotape over and over again. But then as I got older, I was like, hold on, there is a good story in this one. Fortunately, the other 10 don't have a good story, but this one stands up. So I completely agree with you. If the artwork is stunning, the best it can be, that's going to make people go, ooh, shiny, shiny. I need that right now. And if it's a great story, they'll be like, give me more. Just shut up and take my parents' money, please.
My parents' money. I've become that other end of the financial loop, I'm afraid.
Oh, have you? You're the walking ATM, are you?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, my family have just come in. Hello, everyone.
Hello, family.
Hello, family. So, earning some money.
Well, yeah. Well, I would say, first of all, shame on you for being attracted to a beautiful woman. That's,
I'll tell her that. She'll like the fact that you called her a beautiful woman. Thank you.
Well, I've never met her, but I'm sure you have good taste.
She is. She's gorgeous.
And also, I just wanted to, I think, kind of a fun way to kind of round this up. We went into talking about the problems with DC Comics and then the comic industry as a whole. And then, we went into some of the ways we're trying to fill in that gap, and kind of do our own thing, which I think, makes a lot of sense. And also some of the other people who are doing that. And then I'm curious, I guess we'll go from Fue, Russ, and then to me, I guess. What's kind of your history, kind of briefly, your history with like DC Comics? Were you more a Marvel kid or a DC kid, or what was some of your favorite stuff from DC? Kind of growing up and then up until now, I guess.
When I was a kid, it was more Marvel than it was DC for me. like, yeah, sure, you know, I'd get Batman, I'd get Superman, but as a very young kid, I didn't really know about anything outside of that, and I stuck with things like Spider-Man, Daredevil, Fantastic Four, and that just it spoke to me on a very personal level. And then as I got older, this new company came out called Image, and they had a book called Spawn. Oh, I fell in love with Spawn. I discovered things like The Crow and Battle Angel Alita and all this great stuff from around the globe. And yeah, it just moved on like that. And I think it's only really when I hit kind of about 25 that I started going, let me give DC more of a shot. And I was reading things like Watchmen for the first time. I was reading Hellblazer for the first time. And I really dug it. I loved both of the big two equally. It's only really in the past few years that I've decided to go, you know what? I don't think our relationship is working out anymore, DC. Same with Marvel. You know, I hate to say this, but you know, it's not me, it's you, kind of thing. So see you later. And since then, there's always been the odd book that I pick up. I mean, what is it? Batman Last Night on Earth. I've been sticking up to date with that, and I really enjoyed that. Most of the stuff from DC Black Label I've enjoyed, but it hasn't quite struck a nerve with me yet. Not the way like Preacher and Why the Last Man did when I first read those books. Those really struck an important nerve, and just I stuck with them right through to the end. If DC could find a way of doing that again, especially with the Black Label titles, you might just win me back.
Cool.
Interesting. What about you, Russ?
Yeah, definitely Marvel when I was a kid. Yeah, I mean, I think the first book I was ever bought was Stalker, which was a DC book, actually. And I'd copied the hell out of that. I think I was only like 5 or 6. And then late 70s turned up, Star Wars, loved that. And Marvel was just everywhere. And the biggest thing for me was Captain Britain. And I'd buy that. That was the first book I bought myself. So I got Captain Britain. And that had reprints of Fantastic Four in it, mostly done by John Buscema and Joe Sinnott. And that was where my art, basically, that's where my my inspiration comes from. But then I also saw Conan books. Then also Avengers, Tom Palmer inking over Buscema, and loads of other stuff. And then later on Starlin and what have you, picking up Captain Marvel and all the stellar stuff. And that was where I was at, really. It was Marvel all the way, apart from picking up Batman comics. Batman did it every time. None of the other heroes really did it for me. It was just Batman. And so there would be a regular content of, you know, Spider-Man, Batman, and anything else I could get hold of at that stage when I was younger. And then in the 90s, when I started having my own money properly, when I started working, I got into the Killing Joke and Watchmen and that kind of stuff. And like, as I mentioned before, I was quite into the more adult stuff and forgetting the younger stuff. Yeah. And I mean, like, for instance, at the time, I despised Batman from the 60s. At the same time, I didn't like Jack Kirby's work. And now I love Jack Kirby's work. And I love Batman from the 60s. I just think it's so wonderful. And it's because you grow, you mature, and you start to appreciate all kinds of different content and art forms and styles, especially in comic books, different styles. I still think it's very important to underpin those styles with good quality skills like anatomy and what have you. And it can be easy to spot those people that just copy a style and don't look at the underpinnings of their artwork. But even then, I was always an advocate of content over style. Style over content was a sin. But now there's far more grey areas for me, and it's about power on the page and powering content in visual content. So yeah, I was kind of like 80 to 90% Marvel, 10% DC. I've got a lot more DC on my bookshelves now because I went out and bought all the reprints of Neil Adams' Batman work. Who again, I think Neil Adams is a genius. And I got a whole bunch of other stuff up there, a whole bunch of like 90s, early 2000s Batman stuff. But I would, yeah, I mean, the vast majority of the stuff on my bookshelves is Marvel, and I would actually say that indie stuff comes very close to the amount of DC stuff I've got.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think it's interesting that you kind of talked about, art being kind of the big draw for you, and the same kind of thing for me. I guess for the ones that I bought, but my dad shared with me his old Supermans. He had a couple Batmans, but which I actually was more excited about when I saw those. But he mostly had Supermans, and these are the really old ones. Probably have some laying around here somewhere, but they're like the goofy kind of things where Batman dies in every issue, and or he's there's a lot of what do you call it, the kryptonite. There's a lot of kryptonite scandals and stuff going on. And so it's just a lot of fun and games. There's baby Superman and dog Superman and little girl Superman and everything under the sun Superman. Yeah, so it's fun stuff. But eventually I saw a comic book shop somewhere, and that's when I started to look into it. And my first thing was X-Force #1 by Rob Liefeld, and that kind of hit it off for me. I already saw the seeds of like new characters there, and it made it. I immediately was like, first of all, I want to be a comic book creator. Second of all, I want to make my own characters. I don't want to draw Spider-Man, even though I really like Spider-Man. I want to draw my own characters. So that kind of sparked everything for me. But I tended to be more of a Marvel person. When I went to the comic shop, again, the art was a big deal, and DC art looked boring and adult to me and not interesting. And Marvel looked awesome and fun. And then Image came along, and I didn't even.
We all know why. We all know why.
Yeah.
It's because they drew the Marvel way.
Yes, they did, huh? So yeah, I mean, it's all fun, and I don't know. I think we can find ways to make our little mark. DC and Marvel have given us the free reign because they're not kind of doing what they need to do, in my opinion. At least. So Wallow, how you're filling in the gap, Mr. Storm, once again, just before we leave.
Sorry, can you repeat that because I missed something?
Oh, that's all right. I was just saying, where can people follow how you are going to fill in this gap that Marvel and DC has made? Once again, please.
Well, you can find me on YouTube quite easily. Just type my name, Storm, into the search bar. You will find some videos from my channel. You can also find me on my website, www.fwaystorm.co.uk.
Awesome. And you, Russ?
Yeah, I'll have an addendum to what we just spoke about before I go on about myself.
Sure.
Before you do, Russ, can I just say I hate to do this, but I've got to go because I've got some hungry foxes waiting for me. I'm afraid.
Right.
It was great talking to you guys.
Yeah, you
hopefully
too,
we
man.
can do this again in the future.
Yeah. Speak soon.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Take care, guys.
Later.
Both myself and Fway would add, I would imagine, 2000 AD to our reading list. And also, as much as I agree with you that there's a hole there and that we've got to fill it, and we will fill it, If Marvel were out there and they gave me a Captain America book, I'd do it in a heartbeat. So that out of the way, that little advert out of the way. You can find me at comicbookblackbelt.com or russleach.com. You can find me on YouTube, Comic Book Black Belt. I have my book out next year, Only Death Can Save Us. You can find that at onlydeathcansaveus.com. There's just a holding page at the moment. In all three places, you can grab a link to my email subscription list where I can keep you up to date with stuff. And go to my Twitter profile, and if we can get it over 1,000, I'm very close. I will actually do some random pics of followers and send out some posters. So that's what's going on at the moment.
Awesome. And I think I do know that Fue is into 2008. So that and then also yes, I think that if DC or Marvel knocked on my door, I would do it too. But my heart is in indies, and it's more for like the promotional opportunity and also the opportunity to just play around with some beloved characters, but other than that, I don't think I'd live where my heart's at, but that being said, you can find out more about me, of course, here on YouTube, also Marsh Comics on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And I think that's a show, guys. It's been an hour and 20 minutes, and I think it's been fun. So thank you, everybody in the chat. Thank you, everybody watching on the replay. If you have any other thoughts on how DC is going and all the rest of the comic industry, please put them in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Other than that, thanks for watching, everybody, and we will talk to you on the next one.
See ya.
Later.